So I'm going to start us off with a little fast forwarding to 3 years from now. So I guess that's July of 2024. And we're assuming that COVID is behind us. So no more COVID. We're back to real life, normal, post-normal. And I want you to all imagine what it is that you want to be doing. You don't have to say anything, but just in your mind picture. In July of 2024, I'm on the road to success and this is what I'm doing. Okay? So that's the first thing. And then to start thinking about, how did I get there? Okay? How many of you see it? How many of you see what you'll be doing down the road in 3 years? Anybody? Sorta? Okay? How many of you don't really have any idea? And that's a perfectly good example. Okay, great, because my objective today is to give you some tools where you will have clearer answers to those questions. And I really want to thank you all for showing up today and taking the time to learn a little bit more about how to create really authentic careers. I designed this workshop for these uncertain times, and just by way of background, I teach at Yale. I teach a course called Creative Collaboration. I also guest lecture and do all kinds of good stuff in the career space for musicians and arts leaders. And I'm also a pianist. I've been playing the piano since I was 5, so I'm a musician like all of you, except I'm not like all of you. I'm an amateur, but I love it and I get it and I get why people want to do this. And I really love what I do, and I did not start off doing this. I started off as a French major who then went to law school, who then suffered through a law career for a really long time until I got myself back into the arts, running nonprofits. I was in a startup, and then I became a coach, and then I created my whole business, went to Yale, and the rest is history. So I think a lot about why are careers so important. We spend a lot of time doing it, and I've learned that it's really important to love what you do and to have a certain passion for it and to see how you can marry the things you're good at, the things you value, the things you love in your career and find a path to doing that. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And it all starts by having the right attitude, what I call the positive attitude. So to get us started, I have a quick poll, okay? And it's, Shelby, if you wouldn't mind launching poll number 1. Our first poll question is, how do you feel about the possibilities of creating your desired career? Here are the choices. Optimistic. I can do this. Okay. I'm managing. Not so sure. I don't have a clue. I don't think I can do this. So I want you to be honest. This is completely anonymous. Just put your best answer. We're going to take the poll now, and we're going to do it at the end as well. So, all right. I'm glad Romy's optimistic. I'm optimistic for him too. So Shelby, you're running the poll, yes? Okay, so submit your answers, then we'll debrief. Okay, how are we doing? Has everybody had a chance to answer? Remember, just go with your gut on this one. And it's anonymous, so I think we're good. We good?
We're good.
Okay, drum roll. Let's see the results. Oh, Russell, hello. Okay, oh, I love this. 44% optimistic, that's fantastic. And 47% okay on managing. 9% I'm not so sure, and the rest of you, that's great. So we have a lot to work with here. That's fantastic. Okay, just keep that in mind as we go forward. And we're going to do a little exercise that's going to help you tap into a positive mindset, because I think that's really an important way to start. And in order to do this, it's very simple. I just ask you to put down paper, pencil, computer, and sit back in your chair and relax and take a nice deep breath and close your eyes. And I want you to go back to a time where you're doing something that you really love. You're totally centered and in the flow. And this can be something that it might be from music, or from your education or from a job or a relationship, any time where you're feeling at your best. So you feel confident and grounded and in the flow. You're totally connected to what you're doing. You're focused and clear, and you feel challenged, and you're up to that challenge. And the thing is, you love this so much that time is going by and you don't even notice it. So this is you at the top of your game. And I want you to just zero into the first experience of this flow and joy that comes up for you. And start to pay attention. What is it that you're seeing? What are the shapes that surround you? And what about the colors that you associate with this experience of joy and flow? And now, what are you hearing? What are the sounds that envelop you? What are you touching? What's the temperature in the space in which you're having this experience of joy and flow? So along with what you're seeing and hearing and touching and feeling in your body, what about some aromas that are present in this wonderful experience of joy and flow? And how about some tastes? So we have tastes and aromas and shapes and colors and sounds and the things you're touching and feeling. And I want you to take one more deep breath. And on a count of 5, I'll ask you to open your eyes. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Open your eyes. How do you feel? Pretty good, right? Well, chances are you tapped into a psychological state that's known as flow. And flow is when you are at the top of your game, and it comes from the study of positive psychology. And positive psychology says that we as humans are entitled to be happy and that there are things that we can do to make ourselves happier. And the whole notion of happiness and success is that when you're happy and enjoying what it is you're doing and optimistic about your future, you're more likely to achieve success. So that actually is research-based, and it's all part of this study of positive psychology that started with a very famous psychologist named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote a book called Flow. And so flow is when you are doing something and you're totally engrossed in what you're doing, and you're in this loop of challenge and meeting the challenge and feeling really great and not even noticing time. And that's why it's called in the flow, in the zone. And what's great about flow is it can be experienced by artists, by painters, musicians, but also doctors and lawyers and accountants, pretty much anybody when you're in that zone. And what's really great about flow is it kind of sums up your best talents. And it's a very, very elevated state of performance. And what's great about musicians is that you all are capable of experiencing what's called super flow when you perform and compose. So the first thing that I'd love to hear from you is what kind of experiences did you have? And I'll start out with music. So how many of you had music experiences? Because that's very common among the music crowd, of course. What about something involving people? Who is interacting with other people? Absolutely. Who is doing something that did not involve music? Anybody want to volunteer? Okay, Lawton, may I call on you?
I was thinking, it's been a couple years ago now, but I went on a really nice hike with my wife and 2 of our friends, another couple, and it was cold and beautiful, and it started snowing on the hike, and it was just one step after another, and it was just kind of lost all sense of time, and very intense, like, sensory experience with people I love.
Nice, and that's so great because you're doing something that you love, you're with people you love, and having these amazing feelings. So just think about those times when you're at your best, and that's going to tell you a lot about what you're like at your best. And so what we now want to do is capture that experience of flow. And the way to do that is through language. So what I'd love for you all to do is to pop into the chat a word or 2 words that describe what you're like at flow. And you'll see why we're doing this for a minute. So just pop the words in the chat and I'll start reading them. So when I'm at flow, I feel, or I am. Just put it in the chat. Focused, confident, aware, timeless, light, helpful, free, centered, clear. Ooh, instinctive, connected, floating, curious, self confident, in charge, adventurous. Oh, at peace, adaptive, powerful. Yeah, creative, that's coming up a lot. Selfless. Nice. So you get the idea that this is pretty good and we're feeling probably pretty good. So, what you can do with this is you can actually capture the experience of flow. And I have these worksheets for you. And on the first page of your worksheet, after the outline, well, I'll screen share and I'll show you what I mean. You can, let's just get this. Where's this? All right, hold on. All right, no, that's not it. That's not it either. Sorry. All right, I'm going to stop the share. Sorry. But anyway, on your worksheets, there's a place that says, I am. It's your best self-affirmation. And what I'm going to invite you all to do is to write down on your worksheet a few words after the words I am. And that's what I call your flow affirmation. All right? Because this is your reminder of what you're like at flow. We've got some really great words here. And that's one reason I love to do this in a group, because often some words that your friends are saying can probably trigger something really good for you. So just write a few of those down. And as you're writing, I just want to remind you that there's some pretty great things about this whole experience of doing flow. First of all, these are your experiences, right? I didn't say let's pretend you're at your best, right? Let's pretend you took that awesome hike in the woods and in the snow with your wife and your friends and feeling all the love, right? You did it. And so you can actually trust this, right? So that's one thing. And the other thing is it gives you all the information you're going to need to create powerful goals, as we're going to see throughout the rest of the workshop, okay? So remember, it comes from your experience, so you know it's true and you can trust it, okay? So now, in this very interesting time of ours, I want to talk about cultivating optimism, because I did, as Adam mentioned, I work at Yale and deal with a lot of music students there. In fact, I know Russell Fisher. Yay, it's wonderful to see you, Russ, from Yale, right? And I've been talking to the students this year. It's been a really tough year, and I'm sure all of you have had the ups and the downs of not being able to go to school and being stuck in your room, not being able to be with people, and sometimes wondering, can I even make a career out of this music thing, right? So we need some optimism. And the first thing to ask yourself is, what's working? So what's working? I'd love a show of hands. What's working in your life now? Russ, since I know you, what's working in your life now?
Well, I'm here at SoSI again, which is always a huge part of my summer. And I'm also teaching at some of the young New Haven public school students at the Morse camp in the mornings. So
Oh, nice.
teaching and hanging out with, people whom I consider big influences in what I'm trying to do is always a really good part of my summer.
Nice. Who else wants to share what's working? Just raise your hand. I'm going to go on the second page of my Zoom. Oh, yeah. Somebody just raised your hand. Who is that? Yes. Gavin.
This isn't necessarily related to music.
Good.
But just I'm pretty direct with my emotions and like how I'm feeling with myself. So I feel like I'm good at like recognizing the things that I feel, and I think that that's really worked for me.
Yeah, it's actually really important, because the whole study of emotional intelligence is being able to be aware of your emotions and manage them. And step one is, what is it that I'm feeling? A lot of people just go through life pretty numb. So that's really great awareness. Anybody else want to share? And I think it's really important, and thank you for bringing up something that's not necessarily related to music, because one of the things about being an artist is you are a full person. It's not just the fact that you can compose or play music. You have life experiences, and you bring your life experiences to your art. And therefore, all the parts of your life are important and matter. So it's important to find out what's working in your life in music, outside of music. Now, who else? I'd love to hear. Yes, Erica.
I feel like at least recently, within the last month or so, I've finally started to get my sleep schedule to be consistent.
Yep.
And then because I'm doing a million things, and so I had to do it, but it's allowing me to actually continue doing all the things I am wanting and needing to get done every day. So that's been really good.
So important, really. That's a really great thing, and it's been very challenging right? When we first went on Zoom, I know for myself, it was really hard to sleep because I was spending my whole life on a computer, right? It's very buzzy and it takes a while. And so it's great that you're able to get back to get your sleep underway. And that gives you the energy to do all the other things you want to do. So those are one set of questions you can ask yourself when you're kind of wondering, okay, what's going on in my life? What's working? And a corollary of that is, what am I grateful for? You know, it's interesting because I told you about the study of positive psychology. It came out from a number of people who were trained as psychotherapists who said, well, we want to use our training to help people go from good to great, not from dysfunction to function, right? And one of the first things they came up with as a practice to help you be positive and develop that positive mindset was gratitude. So that's another really nice thing to ask yourself. And I encourage people at the end of every day or in the beginning of the morning to just jot down 3 things that you're grateful for. And it kind of reminds you of the good things in life. And our brains are kind of wired to look at negativity, so we have to work at being more positive. And gratitude and these questions of what's working, that's another way of adopting that positive mindset. All right, so that's one set of questions. There's another thing that's really important. I think in the beginning of COVID, a lot of people felt that life was completely out of control. Like there was, we were all victims of this pandemic, and we were all stuck in our homes, and we couldn't go to school, and we couldn't perform live, and we couldn't see our friends, and we couldn't travel, all that thing, and we felt like victims, right? So the corollary of that is to figure out what is within your control. Because there are certain things that are not within our control, right? Like we do not have control over the pandemic, but we do have control over our behavior, right? If you have to wear a mask, you can choose to do that. You can get vaccinated. You can do a lot of things to mitigate against the lack of control against the pandemic, right? So thinking about your lives, what's in your control? That's a little bit of a harder question, but who wants to take a stab? What do you feel like you're in control? Yeah, Jennifer.
I feel like something that I've been trying to get better at controlling is when I do and don't give myself access to work, like emails and things like that. And that helps me kind of be a better person, separating my life and my work.
Yes, exactly. That's a really good point. And it's also within your control to set the boundaries between work and not work, right? Which is very hard to do when you're at home, right? And going to school or doing your work from home. But that is something, again, that you can practice and take control over. And so what else do you have control over? Let's share a little bit. You can either raise your hand with the raise hand function or pop it into the chat. Yeah, what?
Kind of a specific one, but I was thinking about, because I'm a composer and I know we have other composers here, and I was thinking that one thing that I have control over is like how we and I like present my work when something's finished. I feel like no matter how the process went or how hard it was to write something or any disappointments, like when it's all said and done, like I have control over, how I talk about it down the road and how I present it to people. And it sometimes helps to remind me of that, especially if something maybe doesn't go as planned after it's done. Now it's kind of a specific music specific one, but it's a good reminder.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. You can take control of your career. And there are a lot of things, right? It's literally how you present yourself. During the pandemic, when we were all shut up at home, right? People actually found that they had more time. And what I've heard from people is they took some classes, online classes, or they built up skills. A lot of musicians I know started teaching remotely and have built up really nice remote studios around the world. That's a really interesting one because, I'm a pianist, as I mentioned. And last year there was an article that said that piano sales during the pandemic were booming, which made me so happy. And that's because adults were home, remembering how they played the piano as children, and they bought pianos because they wanted to go back to piano, or they wanted to give their children the benefit of music lessons. So some people took advantage of this kind of crazy time, right? So again, what's in our control? And one of the things that's a theme, I think, in what I'm talking about today is you actually have control over your level of motivation. And what I'm trying to do today is to give you assets and fuel to help you really pump up your level of motivation. Okay, so that's...
Hey, Astrid.
Yeah. Adam.
Sorry to interrupt. There was Andres also had his hand up in
Oh, I didn't
relation to
see
your
it.
last question. Yeah.
Great. Andres.
It's all good. I was gonna say one. It isn't sometimes, but I feel like my perception of reality.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Because I mean, sometimes it can get distorted just because of if you're in a bad emotional state.
Yep.
But for the most part, you're in control of your own perception, how you process feelings, and
Yes. Absolutely.
just trying to get through everything that you need to.
So in fact, that's the underpinning of everything I'm talking about today, is how to get yourself out of the negative space and into the positive space. And when you start to master these strategies, you do take control over your perception of the world. And the more you can see things in a positive light, that sort of reinforces that positive gene of yours to want to see things more positively. It kind of builds on itself. Cool. All right, so that's one way to start building a positive mindset. And another way, and this is equally important, is to identify the barriers to success and then see what you can do about it. So I'm going to go back to my opening question where I asked you, see the road, down the road 3 years, right? Some exciting thing that you want to have happen in your life. And what might be some barriers to achieving that success? What do you think? I mean, lots of barriers. Performing arts were shut down. Hello. That to me is a pretty big barrier, right? We have to, I know it sounds counterintuitive when we're talking about positive mindset, but it's really important to be able to see the challenges. A lot of times people say, oh, positive thinking, that's just so Pollyanna. Positive thinking actually is pretty deep because it gives people the courage to actually face their challenges and then figure out what to do about it. So it's not all pie in the sky. It's, hey, I really want to be a professional, composer and have my work performed widely. And, there's a pandemic. There's not a heck of a lot of performances going on, right? So what do I do about that? Or, yeah, okay, so this is good. I agree. Finances, finding others to collaborate with. Time, all right? I'm going to write these down, and then we're going to talk about it. Time, finances, business skills, okay? Finding other collaborators. These are great. All right, let's talk about these. I'm going to start with, what else? Procrastination. Oh, absolutely. That one I can help you with. Because you have to figure out why you're procrastinating and then undo it, right? A lot of people procrastinate because they're afraid to make mistakes, right? Or they feel they can't do it, or they don't know how to do it. And so once you start decoding the messages of procrastination, then you can sort of say, whoa, I'm avoiding this because it feels hard. What can I do? Gee, maybe I need to find my friend who knows how to do this, or talk to my teacher, talk to my mentor, talk to my dad, right? Again, identify the problem, come up with a solution. Okay, I want to start with finances. That's a really good one. That's an obstacle. So what can you do about the fact that finances are challenging in this time? What do you think? Anybody have any thoughts? Okay. You want some ideas from me? Oh, somebody, yes, Jennifer.
You can determine what your financial priorities are.
Yep.
Like, what should you put your money towards? What you need to put your money towards?
Yep, absolutely. A lot of people in music, I think, are very nervous about their finances because they haven't been taught how to manage your finances. And at Yale, every year we do a workshop called Financial Life After Yale, where one of my colleagues, who's an investment banker and a CPA by training, comes and he and I do a whole 2-hour workshop on financial literacy. And all of this is very doable on the internet. How to budget, how to save, how not to get into debt, all the things that seem to be obstacles to financial sustainability, right? And you can figure it out on, by talking to people. If your parents have an accountant, having a session with your parents or the accountant, lots of things you can do. Earning money, how to earn money. This is going to, again, sound a little counterintuitive, but if you're graduating from school and you need to earn money, well, what besides music can you do if you can't perform? And so if you have other skills, right? If you have graphic design skills or web design skills or video editing, a lot of composers in the past year got were able to make quite a bit of money doing video editing because there was so much stuff online, right? So a lot of this is a matter of stepping back and saying, I need to learn a few things. So I've written a bunch of blogs. I have a blog, astridbaumgardner.com, and I've also written a book, okay, shameless self-promotion. Here it is. It's called Creative Success Now. It's a very interesting book because I have a lot about SO there. All 4 of the SO people are featured. Russell Fisher is featured. I have a lot of things about SO, but I have a whole chapter on how musicians can manage their finances. So anyway, that's just, again, it's a resource, right? So notice that it's not because you're lazy or there's something wrong with you don't know finances. You don't know. And if you don't know, then it's a question of acquiring skills. And someone else put business skills. That couple of things, again, reading books, going online, doing an internship, right? And remote internships became a thing, and internships are still possible now that we're sort of going back. So again, going through your network and seeing whom you know that might be able to, give you an office internship so you can learn some business skills. The other thing that a lot of people do, it's just trial and error. Decide, hey, I want to start a business. I want to start, like our friends from SO, right? Like nobody told you what to do. I mean, you did a lot of research, but you kind of went out and tried it out, and you learned by trial and error. Time, somebody mentioned that as an obstacle. So that is really a question of perception, because time is a fixed quantity. There are 168 hours a week, my friends. That's the reality, and it's your choice for how you want to spend that time. Again, there are a lot of it is positive mindset, trying to find a positive attitude around what is it that I want to do, and to say no to things that aren't really important to you. I have a chapter in my book on that as well. So there's a lot. Again, it's just a matter of skills. So notice, right, what are we talking about? We have a whole list. So I had 5 issues here that we named as obstacles, and we're able to come up with some answers. And so that's what you can do. All right, let's go. Jennifer. Yeah, self-doubt and anxiety. I totally agree that those inner obstacles, Jennifer, are very, very powerful. And a lot of that, one way to start addressing those is actually tapping into flow. Because remember, if flow represents you at your optimal best, and it's an experience that you've had, then you can work on that and cultivate a whole attitude towards flow. So there's a lot more you can do. I have a whole chapter in my book called The Creativity Killers, and I lay out a whole plan of action for what to do about the lack of self-confidence, because it's very, very prevalent among musicians, among people in the arts, among people who are high achievers, who want to do great things. And let's face it, you guys aren't in the kind of career where there's a clear path from A to B to C, right? A lot of this depends on your own motivation, and you're doing your thing. And so you need as much help as you can get. And that's another really important thing, is to be able to reach out for help. And it's okay to ask people for help. It's okay to ask your friends, your mentors, your parents, your teachers, people who care about you, who want to help you. And interestingly, you'll take that with you in your life, and I'm sure someday, if you've been helped, you're going to turn around and want to help other people, because there's sort of a chain of gratitude about that. I can speak to that myself. Like, I had a little bit of help in the beginning. My parents were Polish immigrants, right? Educated, but didn't know anybody, and they had a few friends who were lawyers, and I spoke to them before I went to law school. Not that they helped me get in, but at least they were supportive of my decision. Things like that. So, and then I love to mentor musicians. That's why I do this, because I think what you're all doing is really important work, and I want to help you. That's why I do this. So again, think about your barriers. The inner obstacles are the hardest ones, Jennifer. I agree with you. And if you want, afterwards we can talk. I'll stay on for a few minutes. One other thing that we should talk about when we're talking about developing optimism, and that is the opportunities that might have arisen during COVID, right? And I've already mentioned remote teaching, right? Building skills, taking classes. But there's another thing I do want to mention, and that's remote networking. Anybody know what I'm talking about here? Remote networking. Okay, here's the deal. In COVID, a lot of musicians, a lot of people in the arts were home. And if you want to meet other people, have more time. In most instances, people had more time. And people were much more open to talking with each other. I will just say for myself, I never go to conferences because I just don't like to travel out of the city. But during COVID, all the conferences went virtual. I attended a lot of conferences and I met a lot of people. It was really kind of cool. So let me read this from Zachary. Reaching out to people you don't know necessarily in person. So it's what helps when you're trying to reach out to some new people is to get introductions from people whom you do know. That's usually the best way to do it. But if there's somebody you really want to meet, you can put together a compelling email to tell the person why you want to meet him or her, them, whatever, and then asking for 20 to 30 minutes of that person's time to find out what they're doing and how they got there, right? And most people, I'm not going to say everybody, most people like to talk about themselves, and you're not asking them for a job. You're asking them for their expertise. People like to be seen as experts. And I've done that a lot when I was transitioning out of my legal career to figure out what else I wanted to do with my life. And I met a ton of people who I'm still in touch with. And I encourage people to do that. I think that's a pretty common thing. So I encourage people. So that's a little bit about the positive mindset. I'm going to stop and see if there are any. All right, Jason, tell us, talk. Do you want to comment?
Well, no, I was just putting it in the chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I early on in SoS's world, we were big, and I think I still am, like reaching out to ask for advice.
Yeah.
And asking about how somebody else did something, or I think I can track so many positive things that happened for So.
Yeah.
Through that, and early on, it wasn't calculated because you really want the advice, but sometimes that can lead to really wonderful things.
Yeah.
And Astrid, I think Elsie is saying that she agrees.
Elsie, good to see you. That's great. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about what I consider the elements of success. Remember I said we want to try to find the motivation to pursue those career goals? And the first thing I want to talk about is values. So as your prep work for this workshop, I sent you all a values assessment to try to nail down your 5, 6, 7 top values. And why values, right? Well, one of my favorite story of values was a student I had in my class who was an absolutely brilliant performer. He was a whiz on the clarinet. And he wasn't really sure what he wanted to do with his career. So his teacher said, what about auditioning for orchestras? He said, yeah, that sounds like a good job. I can do that. The problem was he just could not motivate himself to practice all those excerpts. As hard as he tried, it just didn't work. And he took my class, and very early on, I think in our second session, I have the students fill out a values assessment, the same one I sent to you. And for him, that was the light bulb moment. He said, oh my goodness, my top values are lifelong learning, creativity, and personal growth. And honestly, I just don't see an orchestra career as affording me the ability to keep learning and being creative, growing. And that was the ammunition, if you will, the fuel that he needed to go off and pursue a very different track at Yale. We have a really awesome composition program. So he teamed up with a lot of the composers and would premiere their work, and they would write pieces for him. And he got really, really involved in new music and sort of came to this idea that what he wanted to do was to be a university professor and tour a country. He's from Australia, tour around the country and premiere new work, and that's exactly what he landed up doing. He went back to Australia, got a DMA, led his school's new music ensemble, and here's the irony, he now premieres concertos. So he's actually got a big line of work in orchestra, new music, because that's what he's teaming up with all these composers. So I think knowing your values can be really, really helpful for the difficult decisions in life, because your values are kind of those core principles that run your life. And so it's important because it will help you to filter out decisions, things that might sound tempting, but then when you look at them through the lens of values, you go, that's really not what I want to do, and help you with those difficult decisions. So there are a couple of ways to find your values. And before we actually turn to the values assessment, what about that flow meditation that we did? Who here felt that what you were doing in that experience was important to you? Oh, Erica and Diego. Diego, why don't you share with us? Tell us about what felt important about your flow experience. Tell us about your experience.
Sure.
So
Go ahead.
Yeah, and then Erica. Yeah, Diego and then Erica.
Oh, sorry. So what I imagined was going back when everything started with music. I was playing in a studio with a band when I was like 13 or 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
and I clearly remember that I was having a good time.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's very important for my career because, like as I said, that's where everything started, and that's why I'm where I am right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm hearing passion, I'm hearing fun. Probably you enjoyed being with the people to make the music, right? Something about relationships. Absolutely. Erica, what about you?
I was thinking back to being in undergrad and being in orchestra rehearsal and just like this whole room of people working towards the same goal and like being very intensely in the same emotional space was a really powerful thing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that sounds like a value around community, right? Really feeling united. That's great.
Mhm.
So you might want to decode your flow stories, and because often those things where we're at our best are where we're doing things that feel really important, and those values are so critical. So there's another really interesting thing. Opposite side of the coin. Does anybody have an experience where something made you really angry? Because often the things that trigger real deep-seated anger could very well stem from the fact that your values are not being honored. Anybody have this kind of experience that you want to share? Anyone? Yeah. I mean, those are anger is a very tough emotion, but anger tells us something, right? Anger tells us that something is not right. One of my students was telling me that he was at Yale. He was just a real entrepreneur, and he formed his own ensemble, and he loved community, and he loved his friends, and they would do these really cool music shows on the side. What really made him angry is if people didn't show up, and they didn't tell him, because he felt that that was a violation of the community and a violation of respect. So I think it's interesting, Oh, Calvin, did you want to share? Yeah, thank you.
Hi, yeah. Um, so I grew up in church, religious spaces, like the evangelical church, and I found that when I started kind of pulling away from a lot of that in college, but I was in a fundamentalist Baptist institution for my undergrad experience, and a lot of I think for me, I felt this like oppressive, overwhelming sense of anger that was really hard. I feel like I'm just now starting to kind of move past that to a sort of reconstructive sort of mindset. But I mean, that was a crippling sense of anger that kept me kind of, yeah, depressed and down in ways that it affected me in ways that I'm still discovering right now. And it was not a creative motivator at all for me.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that story. I mean, it sounds like being in that, first of all, it takes huge courage. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for having the courage to do that because it's very hard to go against what you've been raised in, right? You're not the first person I've heard to have the same story. And often what that means is that your authentic self, you couldn't be yourself. And so probably authenticity is a big value for you, right? The need to be yourself. And you also mentioned creativity, that you couldn't be your best creative self, right?
It really a sense of autonomy also that was never,
yeah,
present, self-possession, and sense of trusting self.
Yep, excellent. Yeah, wow, that's pretty powerful. Yeah, Jennifer.
Andres actually had his hand up first, if he can go first.
Andres. Okay, thank you. Thank you for calling each other out because it's hard for me to see all over the screen. Andres and then Jennifer.
Mine would be, I can think in one instance where, I mean, I don't get mad very easily. I can admit that, but when I do, it's from like a loss of trust, especially with students.
Yeah.
Especially when you're like trying to be very vulnerable and open
Yeah.
and given the benefit of the doubt, and then they kind of walk all over that.
Yep, totally. Trust, huge. Absolutely. Thank you. And Jennifer, and then last but not least, let's move on. Yeah.
It's kind of a double-edged sword because it's something that I love, but not if it's not done efficiently. So like if I'm playing in a chamber setting, I really enjoy that. But if I feel like nobody's like pulling their end of what they should be doing, like a lot of times I have a personality where I seem like I want to run everything, but that's not really the case. Like I'd rather other people balanced out the load. So I have very frequently ended up in situations where I just feel like the workload's not balanced.
Yep. And that can breed a lot of resentment and lead to anger. So commitment is important to you. I'm also hearing leadership. If you fill up the vacuum, it's because you're probably really good at it. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to strengths. Yeah, and look at this, Jen, I totally relate. Yeah, absolutely. And that was the story from my student at Yale, right? The lack of respect. The fact that, why aren't you committed the way I am, right? And I know a lot of people that get really upset because they're doing music because they care and they want to do music at a really high level. And if people aren't committed the same way, it is really, really hard. Okay, Calvin, one more share and then we'll move on. Yes. Gavin, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Can't read my screen. Yeah.
Sometimes I can get angry at people who where it seems as though they aren't thinking thoroughly about what they're doing before they do it. So maybe that's a professor who runs a rehearsal and it seems like they haven't prepared for that rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's showing up to some type of chamber rehearsal and someone's, you can tell they're kind of they're improving a bit.
Yeah. No, it's that whole notion of commitment, respect for the group, the community. Absolutely. No, but this is the whole point, that when you're angry and there's something fundamentally wrong. And so a lot of people have trouble with the emotion of anger. What you don't want to do is blow up at other people. That's the whole idea of emotional intelligence. But to actually decode the message and say, whoa, I'm really upset because I value that commitment, I value that respect, I value that trust. And it just reinforces what's really important to you. And that's very helpful to know what your values are, because then you can use that knowledge to make those difficult decisions. So now let's talk a little bit about the values assessment. Do you need me to screen share it or do you have it in front of you? Show of hands. Should I screen share? Yes? No? Yes? Okay. Now I have to find it. Okay, here we go. Let's go. All right. So this is our next. The problem here is just give me a sec. Here we go. Values assessment. Here we go. All right. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Values assessment. So here we have a whole slew of yummy values. And I asked you the difficult task of narrowing these down to your top 5 or 6. Now there's a reason. If we are defining values as the principles that run our life, and you have 20 values, right? Well, that doesn't help you when you're trying to make those tough decisions, right? So that's why I asked you to narrow it down to 5 or 6. And I know this is hard, but there's a couple of ways to make it a little easier. For one thing, I bet a lot of you had a lot of value around relationships, right? Family, friends, romance, community, trust, all of that can be under the bucket of relationships, right? So I'm sure that always helps a lot of people. That's one set. Another set of values has to do with what I call the learning values, right? That's one of my top values, lifelong learning. And my lifelong learning value comprises knowledge, creativity, excitement. It can be wisdom, challenge, adventure. And I know musicians are real big learners. So if you have a lot of those learning words, pick one of them, and that will be your bucket for the learning values, okay? Leadership, expertise, and power. Autonomy, we heard about that. Autonomy and freedom often go hand in hand. And then I want to talk a little bit about authenticity, because authenticity also can be what I call a bucket value. If you have all these words and you just don't know how to narrow them down, maybe those words define your authentic self, and you can group them together. So I'm going to stop my share and see if that's helping to narrow your values down, okay? So the whole notion here is knowing what your values are so that you can make those hard decisions in life. Okay, so that's one of what I call elements of success. The next one has to do with strengths. So I mentioned positive psychology before, and I told you that positive psychologists started out with having people look for the gratitude in their life. But the other thing they started off with were strengths. And a strength is really fascinating because I think we've grown up in a culture that emphasizes a lot of negativity, right? We're always being judged. You've got to be a straight A student, right? You've got these underwear ads where you're supposed to be like, if you're a guy, totally ripped, or a woman, like, skinny and gorgeous and blah, 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 and all those messages that are coming out of, Hollywood to tell us what we're supposed to look like. And I think a lot of the advertising, a lot of the messages in our culture are not very empowering. So positive psychology comes in and tells us, let's look to what you're good at. And I define a strength as something that's a talent, something you're naturally good at. It's also something that you value, what we've just talked about, and something that you enjoy doing. So it's a combination of something you're good at, something you value, and something that makes you feel good. And it's really important to figure out what you're good at when you're talking about your careers, because it can, again, point you in a direction. And for example, the people in so percussion, I always, the very first year I taught at Yale, they came to my class, Josh and Adam, and they had this org chart of so percussion as to who did what. But it was really fascinating because it was definitely, and those are back in the day when there was no wonderful Shelby to help them run the organization. It was the four of them. But they divided up the tasks based on who was good at what. So Adam, maybe you want to talk a little about your org chart and how you four have divided up the work over the years.
Yeah, I mean, part of what we were showing in that class, at least at that time, is, and it probably has changed a little bit even since that time when we went into your class, is that at that time we were thinking of our business responsibilities as being very organized and somewhat segmented. And the truth is that they actually still are. And that was out of necessity, because beyond a certain point after our first few years, it just wasn't feasible for all of us to be kind of focusing on everything all the time. It just kind of got too complicated. So what I remember showing was this very clear chart of like who we call them corners. Since there's four of us, it kind of fits in a box, like four corners of focus for us as administrators, and then other people who work with us, staff members, contractors and stuff, kind of fit somewhere in there. And then my other page was our artistic org chart, which was just this big messy web of scribbles between all of us to reflect the fact that we were somehow trying to balance the necessities of being pretty well organized with our business end of things, and much more egalitarian, even democratic, collaborative in our artistic side of things. I actually think since then, we've been having a lot of discussions about how one side can infiltrate the other a little bit more. Like maybe some of our artistic stuff has become actually a little bit more organized because there's SoSI and Brooklyn Bound and things to program for, and the touring group. And there's just too much for everybody to always be weighing in on. So for instance, now we have a programming committee that Eric and Jason head up that has to do with how Brooklyn Bound is programmed and all that kind of stuff. And if I come across somebody I think is cool, I can throw it in there, but I'm not on every single meeting about that. Right. And on the other hand, how in our business ways, we can also make sure that our collaborations are fluid enough that we're getting feedback from each other, keeping each other informed, that kind of stuff. But our initial model was like, okay, the very idealistic, artistic, four-way kind of mess. And here's our corners of our business. And then over time, we've used those as sort of two poles to kind of figure out when more of one can bleed into the other.
Yeah, no, it's really cool, because I always say that when you know your strengths, you can work smarter and not harder, right? So to team people up with what they're good at and what they like doing, right? And I mean, in any group, I'm sure many of you are in ensembles, right? There's the stuff you love to do, like somebody loves to do the promotion, and somebody loves to reach out and, get gigs. And then there's the stuff everybody hates. And what you do is if everybody gets a little bit of what they like, then you sort of divvy up the stuff like, okay, who's gonna do the tour? Although I guess some people really like doing the tour and keeping the Excel spreadsheets. Whatever it is, you want to match up what you do with what you're good at, okay? So one of the ways to find your strengths is at flow. Again, when you're doing something that you love, that gives you joy and confidence, chances are you're really good at it. And I want to stop right here and say something that's very important. A lot of people have trouble identifying what they're good at and speaking about what they're good at, right? So instead of saying, well, I'm really good at, at organizing the tour. Better way to do that is to say, I love organizing tours, right? And that's sort of code for, hey guys, I'm really good at this and I really like it. So if you find yourself in a job interview or at a donor pitch or something, and you can say, wow, I really love polyrhythms, or I love, percussion, or I love learning new music, right? All right, so this is from Erica. Yes, I agree. Trouble figuring out what you're good at. Okay, so I have a lot of advice about that. First of all, I'm going to give you a big picture way of figuring out what you're good at. Well, I've already given you one idea. From flow, what is it that you were doing, and what were you good at? But then there's something else we can look at. All right, so where is this? Okay, Acrobat Reader. Let's do the share. And that is this little chart here. And think about 4 different areas of strength, okay? So some people are really good at getting things done, right? Making lists, checking off the boxes, focusing, being disciplined, get it done, right? So maybe you want to think about, maybe I'm one of those people that's an achiever. I make my lists, I check things off, right? So that's one area of strengths. Another area is what I call the influencing strengths, right? Really great at communicating, at storytelling, taking command, leadership, convincing people to join your organization, right? Influencing strengths. Then we have down here what I call relationship strengths, where you're great at, you're empathetic, people enjoy working with you because you're easygoing, and you probably inject a sense of harmony, you're very positive, so all those relationship strengths. And then a big bucket of strengths involving thinking, and that is obviously being creative, loving to come up with solutions to problems, being strategic, being analytical, and also enjoying the whole process of learning, right? Collecting information and doing research. So you might want to just think about where your strengths lie. And you can have strengths in 1 category, in 2, 3, or 4. It doesn't matter. The point about strengths is that when you know your strengths and you start playing to your strengths, you will be much more successful than if you're focused on compensating for weaknesses. Okay? Now I'll say one more word about it. By the way, does that help, that little chart of the 4 different areas of strength, right? Just again, and one other thing you can do, there are some really good strength assessment, and I used to for my class, and for all my clients, I used to have a book called Strength Finders 2.0. It's published by the Gallup organization. It's a book that costs about $15 or $20. You get a code. Russell did this. Russell, you've taken the strength assessment, haven't you? Yeah, a bunch of people have. Strength Finder. You get a little code, and you get the code, and you go online, and for half an hour, you answer all these questions, and it bangs out your top 5 strengths. I then, this summer, for another leadership training thing that I'm doing in August, I discovered this other one called the High 5 Test, and it's free, and it takes 10 minutes, and it's pretty good because I took it, and I really like it. So it's free, and you can just go online after this session. High 5 Test, just Google it. You can go on there, and it'll give you your 5 top strengths. And if you want to pay some money, it's $30, I think, you then will get a very detailed report of how your strengths work together, how you can develop them, how you can use them in your career. Anyway, you don't have to pay the $29.99. I did because I'm curious, but those are 2 really good assessments that I recommend. Strength Finders 2.0 from Gallup and High 5 Test. So that's another way of finding strengths, okay? And one last thing I want to say about strengths, and that is, well, 2 more things I want to say about strengths. No one is good at everything. So we are going to dispel the myth of the straight A student, right? And that is a total myth. And in fact, since I teach leadership, great leaders are people who know what they are good at, and they know what they're not so good at, and they hire people and work with people and collaborate with people who complement them, who have strengths that they don't have, so that the sum of what they do is greater than the individual parts. So I think that's a really good lesson. And when I work with leaders, it's very powerful for people to recognize what they bring to the party and where they need help, right? It's another one of these, I can't do it all. I don't even pretend to want to do it all. We're stronger when we collaborate and do things together, and working with those collaborative strengths. So I highly recommend that. I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. All right. Now, in the beginning, let's face it, when you're starting off, when you're creating your own business, when you're starting off in a performance career, often your team is what? Me, myself, and I, right? It's just you doing everything. So there's probably stuff you have to learn. And if you want to do the career that you want to, go into, You got to learn those things. And as you get more experience and you start making more money and you have more of a network, you can start collaborating. And that's just a reality, and that's okay. And again, very important to reach out for help because we can't do it alone. And finally, for weaknesses. Again, if there's something like, if you want to be a percussionist, there's basic stuff you have to know. And I don't even want to pretend to know what those things are because to me, percussion is so amazing and complicated. But the stuff, I think you all know what I'm talking about. And you have to know how to do that if you want to be a percussionist. But what distinguishes, say, Adam from Jason, right? Or Eric from Josh? That's where your strengths kick in, your musical strengths kick in, to distinguish one person from another. So it's the baseline that you want to work to, and then the stuff you build on top of that, that's where your strengths will kick in, okay? Does that make sense?
Hey, Astrid, can I say something really quickly?
Please, yeah.
I was just realizing I don't remember, and if it was communicated, forgive me for just not seeing it. I don't remember if we told folks that we generally leave more than 1 hour for Astrid's session because she goes into a bunch of different stuff. And I don't know if we kind of said that for everybody. So if folks have had something right now too that they have to go for, totally understand. Really encourage anybody who can stick around. She's still got some more really cool things that she's going to go through. So anybody who can stick around, you'll get a lot out of it. But it wasn't clear to me whether we had made that clear because most of our talks have been an hour. But I remembered, Astrid, we usually clear more than that for your talk. So just to say that to everybody.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. Yeah, usually Shelby asked me to do this from 1 to 2:30, so that's what I blocked off. And
well, in that case, sounds like you and Shelby had it together, and I'm just Adam thinking things and reacting. I just want to make sure everybody was down to stick around for a little bit more.
Good.
So,
okay, because I do want to talk about something that I think is pretty important, and that is, and Hannah, thanks for tuning in. Sorry you have to leave. The skills that you've developed through music, okay? Because especially in the last year in COVID, when I was working with all the students at Yale, people said to me, oh my gosh, I'm going to graduate from here in the middle of a pandemic. What am I going to do with myself? And I have a good answer for that, which is, as a musician, you've developed some pretty awesome skills, right? So, for example, how many of you teach, right? Right? Okay. How do you get your students, right? So who wants it? How do you get students, right? That's a skill called recruiting. How do you get paid? That's a skill called financial management. How do you set a curriculum? That's a skill of, being of curriculum development, right? It's also being entrepreneurial, running your own business. And the more you think of the specific musical skills you have as broader social skills, business skills, the more empowered you will feel to go out and get a job and write a resume that talks to your skills, right? I mean, what about planning tours, right? How many of you have planned tours and planned programs? Right? That's another skill, right? In fact, there in the nonprofit world, if you're able to plan events and plan tours, event planning is actually a really good entry-level job for a lot of music people because that's what you're doing. You're organizing a tour, except instead of organizing a tour, you're organizing a gala or a party to meet donors. You know how to do this. You just don't know the language for this. And so the more you can start broadening out those music skills and figuring that these actually are business skills, and you need a job, because don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you people not to abandon the music career. I'm just saying if you need a job to fund the dream, these are some helpful hints, okay? Also, I'm sure many of you have student jobs at school. This is a great way to get experience, and again, something to put on your resume as a hardcore skill, right? So web design, graphic design, video editing, all those student jobs, that's a resume that you can actually shop around and get paid for while you are funding the dream. The other thing I want to say is that all of that discipline that you have brought to bear by being musicians, I mean, probably most of you started playing music of some kind when you were kids, right? So while I started piano when I was 5. Right, so while I'm practicing the piano, like my little girlfriends were playing with their Barbie dolls, right? And maybe your little guy friends were playing video games, or your other little pals, right? And you're there practicing. So what does that say about you, right? All that executing stuff I talked about, the focus and the discipline, not to mention achieving at a very, very high level, right? And I always say that enlightened employers are lucky if they can hire a musician, because they're going to get somebody who is determined to get the job done and do it really, really well. And I say enlightened employer. You don't want to go work for someone who's going to look at your resume and say, what was your last job title? You walk out the door, because that person is not going to be so open to considering different skills. But there are a lot of people out there, and I think this is a trend now, to look at people's experience and seeing, wow, even if you don't say that you were, an office, an executive assistant, you've actually done the work. Yes, I want to hire you. So I want you all to keep that in your minds as you go off, and if you need to get a job doing something other than music, because you actually do have some pretty wonderful skills. And I want you to own that, okay? All right, let's move on. We're now going to talk about goal setting, okay? So the first thing is, how do you set goals? A lot of people wonder how to set goals. So there are 3 ways that I'm going to introduce to you. And the first is that first vision. Like, how many of you had this sort of vision for what it is you want to achieve? You might not know how to get there, but you sort of see it down the road. I mean, for example, our friends at SO, they formed this group because they wanted to create a percussion quartet that had equal validity to the string quartet. Now that is a vision, right? And it's very, very powerful to have a vision, because it's sort of like a magnet that pulls you along and gives you that motivation to want to make it happen. So I'm just curious if anybody has something down the road that you want to achieve. Anybody? And that's kind of hard to do, all right? All right, so that's, as I said, there are 3 ways to set goals. That's one of them. The second way to set a goal is, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go to one of my other documents. Let me figure out which one this is. Music wheel, here we go. Okay, this document, which lays out 10 options for people who want to pursue some kind of a music career. And Shelby, all right, so I think you received this as part of your homework to prepare, and the assignment was to pick the area or areas that you wanted to rate as a 10. In other words, the really, really important ones, okay? So I'm going to stop the share, because this is our second poll. So Shelby, you still here? Or Russell? I think, yeah, you want to do poll question number 2? Because I'm curious. I always like to take a poll, because I have the same 10 options laid out in our poll. Okay, so now I want you to vote, and I think you can vote for more than one, because many creative people want to do more than one thing. So go ahead and vote for the area or areas that you really feel passionate about, the 10 or 9 if you don't give 10s, right? You can vote for more than one thing, but if there's one thing that's really calling you, that's the deal. And by the way, hint, this is going to help us with our SMART goals. So this is an important part of our work together. Oh, you can only vote for one? Okay. All right, fair enough. Sorry about that. Maybe Zoom doesn't allow you to vote for more than one. Okay, so vote for your 10 of 10s. There's no perfect here. We're doing the best we can, right? Okay, so Russ, you tell us when we're done here.
Still waiting on 2 more.
Okay. Again, no perfect here, just, intuitively. What is it that really grabs you? And think about where it's a values-driven decision, something that represents your values, and maybe something you're good at, right? To combine those 2 strains that we talked about earlier. Okay, has everybody voted?
Almost. I think maybe everyone who's like currently.
Okay. I think we're going to close the poll, okay? You haven't voted, then you can pay attention.
Oh, we got 1 more.
Okay, great. Okay. Let's see the results here.
All right. Can you see them, or do I have to press share results, I guess? Probably.
Share the results, exactly. Okay. Haha, nobody in solo. 25% in ensemble, 10% in collaborations. Yeah, okay, music business not happening. Composing, 5%, that's probably our composers. Community engagement, yeah, new creations. And what's the bottom one? Oh yeah, okay, new creations is the other biggie. 40% private teaching, 5%. Okay, awesome. I think we can close that out. So the biggies are, yeah, new creations. I'm not surprised. That's usually usually a crowd favorite at SoSI. And then ensemble performing, not surprisingly, and community engagement. Okay, so what do we do with this, right? How does this work as a goal? So you've rated your area, the thing that you really care about. Now, what do you want to accomplish in that area? And you have to set a goal. No, you don't have to, but it's helpful if you set a goal. And I'm going to define a goal as something that you want to achieve in a specified time period, okay? So, and it should be pretty specific, like, I want to be a great musician, right? Well, that doesn't work so well because, first of all, in your lifetime, you want to be a great musician posthumously? No, we want to get this into your lifetime. And also, it's not very specific. What do you mean, a great musician? Now, a more specific goal is, I want to be a touring percussionist. I want to run my own chamber ensemble. I want to teach at a university and put a time period around it. And I am going to be very interested in speaking to people who want to create your own place in the music world, those new creations, because I think that'll be an interesting conversation. Okay, so let's start jotting down. And I have a document called the Career Plan. I can share that with you. Let's get this going. Let's see, where are you? Sorry. I think it's this one. Yeah, okay. So it's this document here where you can start writing down your goals. And you see this thing called SMART goals. We're about to get to SMART goals, okay? All right, so that's a little bit of the lay of the land here. So those of you who rated creating your own place in the music world, I would love to hear from you. What's your goal? Who rated that as something that's really important to you? Show of hands. Okay, may I call on you, Gerald?
Sure. I'm trying to think how to put it in a nutshell because I chose that because the wording was creating your own place in the music world. And for that, what that meant to me is in line with my desire to teach in an academic institution.
Okay.
And that is because I would like to create more space for people within academia who choose to study non-Eurocentric music.
Okay.
Compositionally, for whatever. But as a I suppose, to be specific, as a composer in particular.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is your goal is to teach in an academic institution with a greater focus on non-Eurocentric music. And what's your time frame?
Well, my time frame to get accepted into a doctoral program, well, I would hope that it would be this coming year, to be accepted into a doctoral program that will recognize that as a valuable goal. And then I'll have to do the PhD, so that'll take 5 years.
So 5 years, it's a 5-year goal.
Okay, sure.
Done. Okay, someone else who rated that as really high. Diego, I think you did. What's your?
My goal, so it's, I literally wrote that I am entirely not sure yet because my journey to be a musician started to as me pursuing the dream of getting an orchestra job.
Okay.
But after starting my undergraduate, I started to know more stuff other than orchestral percussion. So now I have 3 different options.
Mm-hmm.
Either being an orchestra player, a new music player, or a chamber musician.
Got it. Okay. And what's your time frame if you had to pick one of those?
If I had to pick one of those.
Yeah. Unless you want to do all of them at the same time. I don't know.
I've always, I think I would choose orchestra. Has always been my thing.
Okay. And what's your time frame for getting that orchestra job?
Such a good question. I am planning to finish my master's in like 3 years from now. I'm still at the undergraduate level. And
Uh-huh.
after that, I think I'm gonna start taking auditions. If not next or next year.
Okay. So in 3 years, you'd like to get that orchestra job?
I
5 years?
would say, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Someone else. Who else rated that, new creation thing high on your list? Was that you, Andres? No. Okay. All right. Who's got a sort of a goal that doesn't involve academia or orchestra? I'm sort of curious. Anybody? Okay. Gavin.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I picked the specific one that I did, which was the new like space, is
Yeah.
because kind of like what everyone else has said, it's more undecided than it is decided.
Yeah.
I like a big mixture of things, so I really like creating music in like the electronic space, but in like a more acoustic electronic space, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yep.
And then I also really love solo performing.
Okay.
But I also really love ensemble performing. So it's just like this mixture of things. So I think finding some way to create that in a new way would be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's a little unfortunate that Zoom didn't let us take a poll of the different things you want to do, because I really do encourage people to think about what is it that you really love doing and can you combine it, right? So there's no reason why you can't do solo and ensemble performing in the acoustic electronic space, right? There's no, right? Why not? So that could be your goal, just to marry those three. And what would be your time frame for that goal?
My answer would be my entire life, because I definitely want to like perfect it as much as I possibly can, and I recognize that that would take like my entire life to do. But if you're being like realistic in
Yeah.
terms of like, oh, I need to make money doing this,
Yeah.
probably what Diego said, probably like 3 years.
Okay, cool.
And that I would need to make some kind of dent. In
Right.
some-
Okay, so how would you state your goal for 3 years from now?
Did you say how would I sustain?
How would you state it?
State?
Yeah, how would you articulate that goal for 3 years? In 3 years, what are you doing?
I think for me that includes like continuing to go to school. So right now I'm a senior at undergrad, and then I would like to go to grad school somewhere where I can be around musicians who have a very similar goal,
Mm-hmm.
so I can create or be a part of, hopefully like join ensembles that already have that kind of goal.
Right.
And that would be also continuing like creating music and marketing it in ways that are easy for me as like an individual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So that gives you a bit of a roadmap for what to do, for the next 3 years. So Gerald, may I take your
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing
example?
you. Say that again?
Would you be my volunteer to break down your goal a little bit?
Sure. Let's do it.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to do that in a minute. I just want to say one other thing. Who still doesn't feel like I really know what my goal is? That is, by the way, a perfectly legitimate answer. If you're still sort of wondering, what I invite people to do, especially if you're still in school, is to give yourself the opportunity to explore and not commit to anything, and to be very open about taking in information and seeing what resonates. What is it that really feeds my soul? What is it that I'm good at? What do I like? What do I see myself doing? And constantly asking yourself, wow, do I want to do more of this? Or do I want to do less of this? And to allow yourself that exploration. And what I found over the years is that when people actually allow themselves an exploration period, they find what they want to do, and because they're not so worried about making the right choice or the wrong choice. So that's my invitation to those of you who maybe don't know exactly what it is you want to do. Okay, Gerald, we're doing the SMART goal. So now what is a SMART goal, right? We've heard all this stuff. SMART is an acronym, and it stands for specific, that's the S, M is measurable, A is attainable, R is reasonable in the context of my life, my time, my experience, and T is time bound. So what Gerald and I are going to do now is we're going to take this 5-year goal and break it down. And a SMART goal is broken down into a period of time in which you can see the success. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And each point, I'm going to ask you some questions, and we're going to check in how reasonable it is and can you do this. And it's really important. So the A in SMART is attainable. It is really important to be able to answer, can I do this? Yes. Because if you don't believe it, nobody else is going to. Okay, Gerald, are we ready? 5 years from now, teaching in an academic institution with a non-Eurocentric curriculum. Is that a fair statement? Go ahead.
Because it went by so fast, it wouldn't be able to be 5 years. And here's why. 1 year for the application process, 5 years for the PhD, and then I will be qualified to apply for the job.
6 years.
So it's going to be 6, maybe 7 would be more reasonable if you want to be reasonable. 7, it might be 7.
So that was a great correction. Okay. So now we're talking about the year 2028, 7 years from now. Okay. So here's how this works. Let's say 5 years. In 5 years, if you are teaching in an academic institution with a non-Eurocentric curriculum, where do you have to be in 5 years? So that would be the year 20.
I'm already doing that. Sorry.
Which is what? What are you doing?
I teach music at Brooklyn College.
Okay.
It's not, I don't have any control over a lot of things that I wish that I could change to benefit my students. So that's the problem.
Okay. So in other words, you want to be able to create this curriculum. So and that I think is really the goal, right? Mm-hmm. So it's great that you already got a college teaching credential. That's fantastic, because that's already, that is something very heavily in your favor towards getting an advanced degree. So already you're doing a lot. But what is it that you need to be doing so that you're creating your own curriculum, and what you would need to be doing in 5 years? So that in 7 years, some academic institution will hire you so that you can create the curriculum you want to create.
I'm not sure if I understand the question. Your question is, what do I need to do in order to create the academic curriculum? Sorry.
I'm creating benchmarks for you, and we're going backwards in time. So we start out with a 7-year goal, and then we look to what do we have to be, what do you have to be doing in 5 years so that in 7 years somebody will hire you, okay?
Oh, okay. What do I have to be doing in 5 years?
Yep.
Sorry, what?
Yes, that's it.
Right. What do I need to be? I need to be defending a dissertation.
Okay.
That's what I need to be doing.
Okay. And what's the topic?
Well, because I'm a composer, it will be in 2 parts. I'll be composing something original, and then also it will be a paper that will have either to do with African diasporic timeline music or women in Afro-Cuban music, one or the other.
Okay. So you've already, which is great, you've already got a dissertation topic. Okay, what about in 3 years? So that's 2024. So if you're defending your dissertation in 5 years, what are you doing in 3 years?
I'll be doing, academically, I'll be doing coursework. And this is, of course, just academic. All this is just academically. But academically, I'll be finishing up coursework.
Okay. And what are you doing in?
Sorry,
right.
cut out.
But what are you doing? Yeah, sorry. I'm also having some internet issues, so I apologize if I'm cutting.
Sorry.
Yeah. So my next question, though, yes, you're doing your coursework, but what is it that's making you this scholar of non-Eurocentric music?
Oh, I see. Okay, I need to continue with what I'm already doing as a composer and as a performer, which is to be involved in composing, arranging, performing Afro-Cuban music, and pursuing the new research area that I have, which is diasporic or even African timeline music. So all of those things I'm doing already, which is one of the reasons why I find myself frustrated, because I'm doing all this stuff already, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it into something. So.
Okay. You said you're going to go, what's your level of education right now?
I just finished a master's degree.
Master's. Okay. So 5 years to get a PhD?
Usually.
Is that right?
A DMA can be 3.
Yeah.
But usually, at least the places I've looked, mostly they're saying 5, and that's fine with me.
Okay. So to what extent do you need to be, because I'm going to interject myself here a little bit, to what extent do you actually need to be creating a curriculum that you can already be shopping around in something that you want to be doing?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if creating a curriculum is exactly what I mean, because as a composition, I've never been a composition teacher, but I've been a music teacher for a long time, and I've taken a bunch of composition lessons. And my favorite composition teachers are not the ones who impose a curriculum upon me.
Okay.
That's not the point. The point is to make space for people who already know what they want to study. So like, that's the problem. I find that there aren't spaces like that. And I'm really struggling very hard with that right now. And so I need to find something where somebody will let me become that, as opposed to find a place where that already exists, because there doesn't seem to be that, at least not in the world of composition, as opposed to ethnomusicology or theory, but in composition, it doesn't exist.
Okay. So actually, this is an interesting conversation, because what it sounds to me like is that you need opportunities to actually teach composition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Good. That's clear. That I hadn't really thought about it like that.
Yeah, that to me sounds like the challenge. And I would encourage you, and unfortunately we're running out of time, but what I would encourage you to do is to start looking for opportunities to build up a portfolio where you're teaching composition and allowing people to work in this space that you want to encourage. And you might want to start thinking about, where could I do this? And I'll just share with you how I got to Yale. I started by teaching a workshop here, a lot of workshops at Juilliard, like one-off type things. And after 2 or 3 years, I had a long resume of topics, a whole bunch of different topics that made it possible for me to pitch Yale with a full syllabus. So I think that that's something that you might want to start thinking about doing. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, does that make sense?
It makes very good sense.
Yeah, and you may actually, I'm just sort of curious, with that whole idea in mind, with this goal towards being a professor of composition to allow people the space to compose in this non-Eurocentric way, what might be something you can do right now to get on that train?
I mean, do you aside from what I'm already doing?
Yes, because you want to teach composition.
Well, I mean, I'm already doing the composing work.
Right.
My project in SoSI right now, for instance, has to do with timeline music.
Right.
So,
okay.
Sorry.
No, but that's good. So that's already one thing you can put on a resume, right?
Right. Okay. Also, I think that one other thing that I'm in the process of doing is doing a better job of asking for. This is my thing, and I'll try to be brief. But I found over the past week and a half or so that I didn't understand how bad I am at asking for things for myself.
Mm.
And I'm really good. I can be obnoxious and I can be an obstinate banshee when it comes to asking for something for my students. But I'm not good at asking for things for myself. And so, I mean, really, probably that's the crux of it, is that I need to get better at asking for these things without worrying so much, in a nutshell.
And so, you know what? Thank you very much for that elaboration, because a lot of times what gets in the way of achieving goals are these internal voices that we tell ourselves, well, I can't ask for that. Who's going to give that to me? And so your goal, my suggestion is, it's a personal development goal at learning how to ask for things for yourself. And I would encourage you to find little ways so that you can build up the courage and build up that muscle that makes it possible to ask for bigger things. That makes sense? So this was an interesting SMART goal process, because often in the SMART goal, like, we take a big 7-year goal and we chunk it down. We go from 5 years to 3 years to 2 years, and Gerald has a very interesting path here. But we actually did find the nub of the issue, which is, I need to ask for things SMART, S-M-A-R-T, specific, measurable, attainable, reasonable, and time-bound. And I know, Adam and Jason, you were telling me that you guys did SMART goals. Do you want to share what you did? That would really be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. During the pandemic, when we identified that we wanted to develop more helpful and sophisticated ways of reaching out in our community and meeting goals for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, we felt like, oh my gosh, this is such a huge collection of topics in which you could do so many things. where do we start? And none of us really having experience with that. We were really getting into also consulting with other people who know more about these topics who could help us. And we thought, well, the one thing we do know how to do is start with a SMART goal process. And we made a spreadsheet where, as we started to have weekly meetings, which we continue to do, where we just talked about those topics. And each week we would look at one row, which had its time columns, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, all listed out. And we would just at each meeting see what our ideas, how our ideas might move the ball forward a little bit. And actually, like exactly what you're talking about right now. What can we do tomorrow?
Right.
What could we do on next month's Brooklyn Bound?
Yep.
But also, what do we want to see happening in 5 years? And Jason, I would say what was interesting to me, I always thought the sooner things were the more challenging. We found it much more challenging to articulate what the 2 year and 5 year sort of things were going to be. In some ways, it was much easier as a busy organization to say, like, sure, next month we're going to premiere this piece and we're going to reach out to these folks and we're going to do this and that. Jay, would you say that's true?
Yeah, I found like being deliberate with the language of the measurable is really awesome and really tricky. So I feel like as an organization, we kind of have a common vision of 5 years from now that I think we can see in a certain way, but putting language to that will help us kind of guide the goals was really valuable and was really hard. I agree, Adam. It was much easier to say, like, next month, this is exciting. We have this opportunity, more than like in 5 years, this is where we want it to be. That was more like kind of, I think we had consensus there, but it was hard to put the words to it. And it was a really awesome process.
But it meant that our conversations were broad-ranging conversations about very big and sometimes challenging topics, but they were always rooted in the conversation of specificity and time-bound things, which meant, Jason, that we were toggling back and forth between the shorter and the longer all the time. We were saying, we haven't really addressed the longer time frame here. Like, we all know there's this fun thing that we could do in a couple of weeks, but we're not really filling out this part that's about the longer time frame. So Astrid, it was so helpful for us to have that framework. And it's not artificial at all. It actually, like, it's the thing about having some constraint that actually allows your creativity to blossom, right? Because just completely random, free-ranging, blank page creativity is often the most anxiety-inducing thing in the world. But having some kind of structure to go with is actually where you say, we need to fulfill this parameter. We need to figure out this thing, right?
Yep, exactly.
Sorry to interrupt. I would say I know Adam and Jason were the ones sort of wrangling the SMART goals on the spreadsheet. And it was watching that happen and being in some of those conversations, the longer term goals started to make more sense when some of the longer term goals started to make more sense when we actually drilled down on some of the month to month goals. Like, we did like 3 months and it's like, oh, cool, this thing's happening. Might be nice to shoot for 5 years with this to keep that going. So sometimes you just don't know until you do a few of the short goals to learn.
Yeah, and it's also part of that exploration of trying to figure it out. And what I will say is, I'm so impressed with your commitment to doing the work around DEI, because it's really hard. I remember in a board meeting, I said, what are the best practices? And you said, there are no best practices. We're making it up. And I think it's really great that you have the commitment to do it. And I'm really glad that having that structure is helpful, because I agree that creativity thrives with constraints, right? A time deadline, a money deadline, a deadline, something, right? Because you're forced to be very, very creative. So we're a little over time here. So I'm going to wrap things up. Here's the bottom line on goal setting. It's really important to keep at it and learn and adjust as you go through it. So and because we never get this right from the start, when you set a goal, it's a wish with a deadline, right? And the more, it's true. And the more you start doing stuff, you realize, wow, okay, this is really good. This is really helpful. And this stuff, not so good. We'll chuck it. And that's okay, because you're creating your own reality. And so what I would encourage you all is to just set those goals and break them down. A lot of people get super overwhelmed when there's this big juicy goal out there, but to break it down so that you understand what it is that you're going towards and continuing to learn, right? And always informing your trajectory with, what is it that I'm going for? What am I learning? How can I make this better? And the person who said, I'm never done, I agree with you. I think that's what art is all about. We're always trying to do better and better. And it's an incredible lifelong journey. And that's what's so rewarding about it, is that it's this very rich learning experience, a lifelong learning experience. So this is pretty good. A goal is a dream with a deadline. I agree with that. That's really great. If anybody wants to stay, I would love to hear your takeaways from this. If you got to go, totally get that. But it's always a pleasure to come to SO. And one of the reasons I love it is I love this program. I hope we're all in person next year. But I just love the fact that Eric and Adam and Josh and Jason, you always share your experience, and it just makes it so much fun for me. And I always learn new things. Like I didn't know about this whole SMART goal thing around the DEI, and that's great. So anybody who wants to share, I would love to hear what you're taking away. If I can call on you in the order in which I see you in my little boxes, if you have to go, I totally get it. Gavin, anything you learned?
Gavin, can I just jump in, Astrid, before Gavin? Can we just take this moment, since some of us do have to leave? If we could unmute and give some love Astrid's way, it's always
Thank you.
a wonderful, wonderful moment.
Woo, woo.
And definitely we don't, Andrea did this yesterday with his talk. Some folks stayed on to talk, which was wonderful, but it's just nice to be able to say thank you, Astrid. Thanks for being here.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I'm going to go around.
Gavin.
Anybody who wants to stay quickly? Gavin, what did you learn today?
I think the most powerful thing that I learned, or really what was reinforced, because I was at this last year as well.
Oh, good. Yeah, I remember you. Yeah.
So I think for me, it's being like free to be creative within like a restraint that you've created yourself. I think that that's extremely powerful.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you. Diego.
I'm really thankful of all the information you have given us today. Like it has been really, really cool. And it like the thing I would say has been of the most useful for me has been that it helped me to have a more clear path towards my goal.
Great. I'm so happy to hear that. Russell.
Well, actually, I realized when you started talking about the SMART goals again that this is the 5th year since that.
No, I know.
This is my. I think I'm like partially there. I'm like maybe halfway to what I was like. I don't remember exactly what I said in my SMART goal in 2016, but I know it had something to do with being a doctorate candidate. So.
University professor. That's it. And you're on the path. It's just really cool.
It's cool to see that.
Yeah, great.
Astrid, isn't it also the case that when you need to revise your goals because new input happens or something didn't go necessarily the way you learn something very specific from that, which is not just like, oh, it didn't work out. You're like, I thought this thing could happen on this timeline. This other information or these other events happen.
Yep.
Therefore, what I can take from that is this information, which I could now use in a new set of forward-looking goals. It becomes very like you become your own teacher through this process.
Exactly. And that's what I mean about that lifelong learning process. Absolutely. Mary.
So, this is actually something like I really needed today. I was having a lot of conversations like this morning with my partner, talking about like goals and how to get there and, you know, all the self-doubt and everything. And so this was incredible. But I think one of the biggest things I took away is that the reason I get angry is because I care about things, and like my things that set me off are things that I value.
Yes, exactly. By the way, this one of the most interesting conversations I've ever had on values, because I really appreciated how you all really related to that whole notion that when you get angry, it means you care, and it means that there's a value that's not being honored. So that's a great takeaway, Mary. Absolutely. Eric.
Well, you know, this not this week, but the week before that had led, like, I had a lot of conversations where it was like Adam said, like I had new input at the things that I thought were going to work out, or like things that I thought were, you know, going to be the case, or not stuff that I value anymore, or like my priorities have shifted. And so I think one of the things that, you know, I've just taken away is that it's time for me to set some new SMART goals and to adjust the old ones that I have. And I actually found my Creative Success Now book on my bookshelf this morning, and I'm going to open that back up and review a couple of things and write some more SMART goals later tonight.
Oh, I'm so thrilled. Thank you so much. Aiden.
Yeah, I took away the part you were talking about how you have out of your skills that you have a strength, and like being able to know how to use it and how good you are at that particular strength. Yeah.
Good. Excellent. Zachary.
Hi, I really enjoyed the flow experience at the very beginning. And it was like something from say 6 years ago now, but it really kind of connects with one of my main goals like right now. I'm not like kind of like I'm still so young, and I kind of like want to stay in school and like stay connected to like a lot of teachers, and like I have a lot of different goals, but like I'm also trying to make space for like this is my gap year right now. If something really takes off and I'm really passionate about it, then like going back to school can wait. So
Nice. Good. Well, I'm glad it was helpful. Thank you so much. This is always really fun for me. Any last words? Anybody want anything more? I'm here for a few minutes. Otherwise, we can say goodbye.
Astrid, there's a way for folks to get in touch with you as SoSI alums if they want to at some point?
Absolutely, yeah. Astrid at astridbaumgardner.com. And if you Google me, I'm very findable, but that's me. Okay, folks, thank you so much.
Thanks, Astrid.
Enjoy SoSI, and next year we're going to all be together. That's my promise, right?
Tell John we said hello.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, everybody. Good to see you.
Bye.
Thanks, Astrid.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Everything good with the videos, Russell?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to like finish it today or tonight or something. It shouldn't be. If it's just lining them up, it shouldn't be too bad.
Okay. Is it helpful for me to send you stems of everything when I get a mix, or just a final mix?
Probably just the final mix. So is there like everyone has a thing they line up to in the beginning, or
Beginning of March is all in their own time. So like there's like 3 minutes up front where it's like, boop, boop, like you can't line anything up. About halfway through, there's a click that comes in and they start to line up, and there's a few big hits that you can line those up. You'll see it when you line them all, when you line up the end of the wave file, like the very end of the session. If you line all those up and then look backwards, you'll see where and you can sort of scooch them all together. But
okay, cool.
It might be easier for you to have stems, but I can send you the rough mix. And if you feel like, man, I have no idea who comes in when, like it'd be nice to have the stems to see when Diego comes in.
Right.
Just let me know and I can get those to you. But
okay, cool.
Okay. Thanks, Brohim.
Yep. I'll talk to you later.
See you, buddy.